Good morning. I'm joined today by Eric Baijal, who is Managing Partner of BBM Solicitors. Eric, could you give me a little bit of background about you and your firm?
Thanks, David. Nice to be with you. So BBM was formed in November 2010. So our 10th anniversary year is, I suppose, a bit different from what is expected at the start of the year. I suppose we're a bit different in the sense that the balance of our practice focuses on the contentious. So just to put it in perspective, we are split between offices in Wick in the far north and a physical office in Edinburgh in George Street. About 70% of what we do is either litigation or insolvency, corporate restructuring. Another 10% corporate of more vanilla nature, and then the remaining 20% property work and a small amount of private client.
Okay, so as you know, what I wanted to do is chat to you about your experience of COVID, the lockdown, etc. But let's start off with casting your mind back to that previous life that we all had at the early part of the year. How were things before the lockdown?
So the insolvency market was pretty benign, actually, and it was reasonably quiet. But litigation generally, we were busy. And I think what sums it up, I went off with work on the 12th of March for a trip to Africa. Because of what was happening at home, I came back early, landed on Saturday, I think it was the 15th, and arrived in the office somewhere around the Monday morning was the 17th. And I knew I'd come back into another world. Between that Monday morning and the Wednesday lunchtime, every corporate deal we were working on, every property deal of any note we were working on, had either been postponed or had collapsed completely. So there was nothing gradual about it. We went from being extremely busy, had a good January, February, first half of March busy, to just off the edge of the cliff.
And did you send staff home to work?
So I think lockdown was announced on a Monday night, and we had taken the decision on the Monday morning already that we were moving to the next phase of our resilience plan, which meant we were all going to be working from home. So the Monday had been spent effectively getting people set up at home with workstations and so on.
And how easy did you find that?
For the fee earners, I have to be honest, it was relatively easy because the fact we work between Wick and Edinburgh, we operate as one cost centre. For example, the employment lawyer in Edinburgh is serving our Highland clients. I'm doing a lot of my work isn't based in the Highlands and elsewhere. When we set up in 2010, one of the reasons we were able to come to Castrum at that stage was we went straight onto cloud computing at that point in time. So there wasn't much difficulty for the fee earners. Many of us were used to working remotely. For the admin staff, it was completely new, but they coped remarkably well, and I would say we were fully functional within 2 or 3 days.
It's interesting, isn't it, how easy it has been for many people to do that. Certainly it was easy for us to do that, having thought about doing it for a number of years, actually, but not actually having done anything about it. Okay, so now that we're kind of getting back to normal and lockdown is easing, how are you finding things?
Yeah, well, I suppose for a lot of our team it is relief, because although the transition to lockdown was easy, it was a very hard time for a number of fee earners, because particularly those that had children at home and were having to homeschool, we effectively had people working around the clock because they were homeschooling and then effectively working a back shift when it came to the law. And so people were very flexible and very good. So there's an element of relief for people that schools are back, and that's made a lot of people's lives a lot easier. We're still not back in our office, so it's not normal for us. Pretty much the working day is similar to what it was during lockdown. We have 2 admin staff basically based in our Wick office now and they are, the phones are back diverted to the offices, and they're dealing with mail and so on and so forth. But everybody else is still at home.
Have you noticed an uptick in work now that we're easing out of lockdown?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I mean, I'll be brutally honest. Start of April, for example, I was hearing all these lawyers say that they were very busy, and I wondered actually what work they were doing at that stage. I should have had more faith to believe that the work was going to come back and come back quickly. But April was a worrying time. There was days I was out in the garden playing football with my boys, and I'm sure better motivated, better organised lawyers would have been engaged in all sorts of business development activity at that stage. But, it was quite hard to be motivated and to concentrate. And of course, if we knew then what we know now, we would all have taken advantage of the time off to rest. But I would say that what happened at the beginning of May, it seemed to us that people decided, okay, we need to actually get on with some work and get things moving. And then at the beginning of June, things just took off. Now, I suspect there is an element of pent-up demand being released. However, because our work tends to be counter-cyclical, I saw it in 2008, 2009 as well, and you'll remember those halcyon days for litigators, David, that as soon as the money starts to get tight, people start fighting over the money. So we have been we are busier in May, and we've been extremely busy since the start of June. As well, I suppose it's artificial because people weren't taking holidays during the lockdown period as much. We had people furloughed, particularly over April and May. Most of them were back by the start of June. So that holidays make things artificially busier for those of us in the office too. But I mean, June was our best month, for a number of years in terms of activity levels and chargeable time. And I suspect that it's the economy generally, where we are in the cycle, the type of work we do, and then also demand coming back.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely fair. So trying to look a little bit further forward, maybe trying to look into the end of this year, start of next year. What's your feelings? Where do you think it's all going?
Yeah, so I suppose my view has been refined a bit over the last couple of months. I would say that a lot of my work's insolvency related, and the insolvency market at the moment is still quiet. And the reason for that is that I think the government support, and that's a totally apolitical statement, I think it has been successful in terms of avoiding mass redundancies, avoiding insolvencies. The market has been more resilient than expected, particularly, for example, manufacturing, engineering, even tourism, hospitality. That casualties are starting, but not at the levels we expected. In my kind of world, insolvency and restructuring, we expect that probably the end of this year and Q1 of 2021, it's going to get busier in our world. And there's a number of reasons for that, mainly to do with the tax deferrals all rolling up into spring of next year. There's going to be some hard political decisions to be made, which I think will affect how bad it gets. So the CBILIS loans and the bounce back loans, they're going to start to fall due about the same time as these VAT payments in spring 2021. And we see evidence there'll be a lot of small businesses, particularly, will not be in a position to make the payments. So the question is, how hard does the government encourage the banks and HMRC to go in at that stage? Will those debts be restructured? Will we have a mass of corporate insolvencies? Now, it might not be an Armageddon, as some people have suggested, but I think that level of work, that type of work for us, because that's so important, means that in the medium term, we expect to be busy, to put it neutrally. And I would say, for example, we're trying to recruit, an extra person to that type of work at the moment, not on the basis necessarily of even the work that's here at the minute. We're busy at the moment, but looking ahead to what we project. So far as the vanilla part of the practice is concerned, I really don't know. Residential property, for example, has performed far higher and better than I had expected it to. Now, any of our private client practice is mainly in the Highlands, and we've got an interesting phenomenon at the moment in the Highlands of people wanting to move not just from the central belt but from the south of England and other places, because now they've always dreamed of being able to live in the Highlands but never been able to do it because of work, but now they're working from home and they can do it. Whether that's a bubble that bursts or whether it gives a continuity of work. The advantage we have in the North Highlands is we've never really had a bubble before, and to a great extent it's been a local marketplace, even in the commercial world and the SME world. So hopefully that might be a bit quieter, but still effectively stay active.
It's interesting, actually, because I was speaking to one of our clients who is based in Dumfries and Galloway, and they were saying something very similar about people looking to move to a more rural location, because of course everybody now knows that working from home remotely is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so Eric, last question. If there's one thing you could take away from the experience of lockdown, what would it be? One point of learning, one thing that was maybe a flashlight aha moment?
Well, if I may have two, I think firstly, looking back after 5 months, it's this realization that you can, as a team, do things that you think are impossible. If you'd said to me on the 1st of March, you can have everybody working remotely and it will be fine, and broadly speaking, there'll be teething problems, but you will get it. And if you actually take the constituent elements of what were involved, there was nothing there that really we didn't know or we couldn't have done. We just frankly hadn't had the belief to put the whole thing together and to take the plunge. And of course, the fact that the whole market was in the same position helped greatly. Video conferencing like this, has revolutionized the way we do it. And I think that will stop me having to make unnecessary travel trips, going forward. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this, that a lesson to me is have more faith and belief. If you're doing the right things in the right sequence, the work will still come to people who are able in particular areas. And sometimes panicking about things doesn't really achieve anything. And I say that as a lesson against myself, because there were weeks at the end of March and early April I was thinking, what's going to happen? And taking a calm step back and examining objectively the fact there will be, for in our case, a certain type of work that needs done. It's going to happen at some point. It's just a question of getting through that. That's been an education process for me personally.
I couldn't agree more. We went from having 85 people in an office at their desks to having 85 people up and working at home in just over a week. It was stressful, but it was possible. It was doable. Eric, thank you very much. That's been very helpful. I'll let you go on with the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, David.